Okay, so just like to formally welcome you along. I'm James V and I work for Mayflex. So we're pleasure to host the Tether team today. So we've got Roman Golfman and Mike Morris. Roman is the CEO and Mike Morris the CMO. So without further ado, I will pass you over to them. So thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us indeed, and thank you, James, for the great introduction. Hopefully the connection problems have been resolved. So if you can't hear us, just raise your hand, and then we'll see if we can adjust anything on our side. All right. So the topic of today is sorry, skipped a few slides there. So the topic of today is to look at kind of the situation right now, especially during COVID. Look at some best practices and look at kind of where the market is, where we see it going. And also to give you some insight into how the product works, and perhaps you'll learn a couple of things that you didn't know. So I can see from the attendee list, quite a few of you have installed Tether boxes before, but just as a quick recap for the ones that haven't. So we're a London-based company. We are a cloud platform for physical security, and we've been around since 2009. We're based in central London, so our offices are in Liverpool Street. We have about 1,000 customers, or over 1,000 customers, using the platform to date, and that's in retail, housing, finance, construction, healthcare, etc., etc. So we're deployed quite widely, so we understand the challenges of those specific verticals, and the whole concept of Tether and what we're trying to do as a business is to really simplify physical security, is to give you something that you log into that resembles YouTube or Facebook, that lets you manage all of your security installations. So looking a little bit beyond kind of your standard video surveillance alarm, we try to effectively be like the CRM for the security industry. So you can see all of your customers and what they're doing. So if someone made a change, you can see that they've made the change. You can undo it. So it really gives you that that customer response where you can say, "Yep, I can see what you see. Let me help you." And ultimately, it just becomes a way for you to provide a service rather than just install a CCTV installation and walk away. So this is what Tether does. So Tether takes everything that you have on your existing infrastructure, whether it's cloud enabled or not, and it securely tethers it to a cloud service. So the idea is that you're effectively upgrading all of that legacy stuff that's on site, and you're putting this up on a dashboard that you can then manage all of those devices. So this is the equivalent of effectively driving to site, plugging in a laptop and typing in the IP address of those devices, or in case of serial devices, physically hooking up to them. So this is what Tether does. And I'm going to pass this over to Mike now to explain, what is this cloud and why should you care? Why should you care, really? Over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Roman. Well, for those of you who've got as many grey hairs as I have, you may well remember the good old days of big mainframe computing, which effectively was a multi-tenant environment in a large building with lots of customers coming into the same system using all the shared storage. Well, we've gone a long way since then. We moved from there to what was generally known as distributed computing, in other words, a lot of PCs on people's desks. Moved from there to using server farms, and now it's actually gone full circle. We're back to big computing suites in large buildings with lots of people connecting to it. And ultimately, that's what cloud is. It has a lot of advantages over the old mainframe days. Firstly, everything is virtualized in the cloud environment, which means that it will run on multiple machines simultaneously. So if one machine goes down physically, it carries on running through the other virtual machines. Secondly, it can be expanded almost as much as you like, because we just increase the resources every time we need it. That can be done either on a contractual basis where we agree in advance we need more resources, or it can be done on a burst case, just on the off chance that something new's come in and more bandwidth, more CPU time or more memory is required for a short period. The net result is incredibly flexible. It's also incredibly secure because everybody's running on their own virtual machine, meaning there can be no interaction with other systems or other applications that are running. And we also make absolutely certain that any domains that we're running within our own platform are completely clear, and there's no way of cross-fertilizing between systems. So cloud is a very, very good way of going forward. Completely reliable. It takes into account all of the disaster recovery, runs on established platforms like AWS, and there are no hidden costs. It's me again, I just realized that. Okay. So if we look at where we've been over time, so obviously CCTV has been around an awful long time. I was actually looking at an old CCT image of a town I lived in from the 1970s and realized just how poor the video was at the time. Obviously video's been improving over time. Initially there was just a simple case of VHS adoption. It then became digitalized, so we started recording to DVDs, which gave better resolution, also allowed us to have greater recording time. And then eventually in the 1990s, we started talking about IP. And as well as voice over IP, we started running video over IP. This basically meant that the whole network could be put to one side and used as part of the overall video system. We could then start to have the alarms going through the same network as the video, and everything could start to be integrated. The problem obviously with it is it relied on internal IP infrastructure. And if that IP infrastructure wasn't totally resilient, then things could go wrong and everything could stop. By moving across into the cloud, everything is there and is highly available. And we started to see this cloud movement in the early 2000s. Later adopters in some parts of Europe, early adopters in some parts of the USA. But then something really strange happened at the start of this year. We started thinking that potentially it wouldn't be a very good idea to start going into offices and starting to look at equipment, mainly because we could all drop down dead of COVID as a result of it. So the net result is that everybody is starting to work remotely. And we're in a position now where we have to continue that remote working in the long term. And it's estimated at the moment that about 40% of all jobs will remain working from home and not going back into the office. So the whole of the industry needs to catch up with that. We need to make sure we have provision for our customers to work from home. And we need to make sure that our engineering resources limit the time going to site, simply because the customer won't be there to see us. Perhaps back to Roman now. He can tell us how it all works.
So what we're trying to do at Tether is to provide as many tools as possible for you to do as much remotely as possible. So the way this works, and we'll talk a little bit about, potentially not even having to attend site, is you add a tether box to each location, and then that tether box creates a secure connection back to a cloud service where you see all of your network devices, all of your serial devices, alarm panels, CCTV. And I can see we have a question from Colin asking if we can connect to Pyronics. Pyronics is on our roadmap. Presently, we are connecting to Eaton panels and Scantronic panels. But if you have a requirement to connect to anything else, do let us know, and we'll reach out separately to say where it sits on our roadmap. So the idea of once you've added this tether box in, you can then decide how the individual components operate. Are you recording stuff straight to the cloud? Are you recording stuff locally? So all of that is managed centrally, and you have a single sign-on to all of the sites. You see them as a single dashboard, and even if you have multiple engineers in the company, you can just decide to give access to additional engineers, or to even give them access to all sites by default. So we have a very flexible permission system, and the idea is that this one central dashboard effectively controls all of your installations. So what does this mean in terms of kind of comparisons to traditional versus versus the new way of doing things? So before, if you have a problem on site, a lot of the times you wouldn't know until the evidence is required. So it would be quite catastrophic. It would be two different conversations. It would be the customer calling up and shouting that something happened and I don't have the evidence for it. Or the other conversation could be, we've notified you about this multiple times, or you can even be the one to reach out to the customer to say that we know that there's a problem with this camera. Would you like us to schedule an engineer visit? So we're trying to again help you build a completely different level of service where you can proactively deal with problems before before evidence is lost. So similar stuff happens across the board. It's a very different, very new way of operating. So if you go to youtube.com, your first thought isn't, do I have the right version of the software? Is the firmware up to date, etc. It's always available. It's always there, and that's what Tether is. So when you log in, it's always the latest version. It's always the latest and greatest. But at the same time, we understand that you may want to delay certain updates being pushed out. So we've added to our roadmap ability to schedule updates. So that's something that will be coming in the next quarter, and we'll make an announcement as soon as it's ready. So all of this is also we're going to share all of these slides for you to review later. So we're gonna try to move quicker, so we're not keeping you for too long. But we'll share all this information, and certain slides also have QR codes for you to download white papers, etc. So this slide also talks about a few of the of our key missions as a company. So typically when you install a system, you need to think about the security of it, and it's generally speaking, it's not very secure by default, because you need to either do port forwarding or you are sharing credentials between different people. Here it's very much every person has their own login, they have their own passwords, their own permissions, everything is managed centrally, and we don't allow you to pretty much leave site if something is not secure. We'll let you know about this. And generally speaking, you don't really have to do very much, because we will ring fence the devices on site, and we have a slide that covers a bit more of that further down. Oh, actually, there it is. So if there's a QR code there that talks about our internal security policy. So if you scan that, it will take you to a document that talks about which data centers we use, what specific security policies we follow within the organization, how we keep your data safe, how we handle our processes internally. So all of that is there. Feel free to have a look at that. One thing I do want to cover is COVID poses a unique challenge at the moment. So what is happening? All of the local teams now suddenly find themselves being remote, and the only way for them to access their HIC Central or their whatever analytics or management platform that they have is to do port forwarding and to do this quite unsecurely, or to start investing in VPNs. And the whole thing is quite difficult to move from a central control room into small distributed teams. So this is something that we tried to help address by adding a tether box to site. It creates a secure channel back to that site, and then the person can be anywhere. So it's something that's quite pressing right now, and I think the solution lends itself very well. So handing over to Mike.
Yeah, certainly. So we have a fairly nice system in place which will allow us to install tether boxes during the lockdown period. Very, very simple and straightforward. We are using Mayflex, obviously from the fact that they put together this training, as the main distributor. So you request your tether box from Mayflex, they will send it directly to the customer site. It's designed such that somebody on site can plug this in, so they can plug it into both the power and the data. And then once it's all connected physically by somebody that's not even one of our engineers, a local person, then an engineer can log into the platform remotely from any browser interface, and they can commission that system. And then we'll also be informed that that system's been commissioned and the whole box is activated. So it's a very nice, very simple method of doing things without having an on-site engineer attendance, limiting therefore engineer attendance to problems which may occur occasionally after installation, which normally are down to somebody plugging the wrong cable into the wrong place. Right, so as an engineer, what can you see? Well, you have access to our dashboard, and that will tell you everything about everybody that you're working with. So all of your customers will be available on the screen. You can see the situation they're in. You can see any problems that they may be experiencing. You look at the health of the systems, the level of RAM use, the level of disk use, anything of that type, and also such problems that may occur there. So for example, the one they mentioned there, is there's a number of power cuts that maybe have occurred over the last few days. So you can go back to your customer and it says consider adding UPS. I would say sell them a UPS if you're really on the ball there. It also allows you to go online and troubleshoot some previous situations. So you can look at the past history of a particular device if you think there's been problems or if the customer's reporting problems. And it can tell you such things like packet loss. Is there a network problem? Is it being installed in such a place that's got so warm that there are temperature issues? Or could there be that somebody's just added a nice new device to the network and they've got an IP conflict? It also allows you to see all the things on a map. So for example, if you want to go off and have to go to a site, then by looking on the map, you can see where any problems exist and then actually plan your job. So you go from site to site sensibly rather than going from base back to a site several times during the course of a week. But most importantly, you can fix most things remotely. So the most important thing you can do is to go onto the platform, do all the diagnostics, and then do the remote fixing, hopefully avoiding site visits altogether. From your customer's perspective, they can see their dashboard. So it's a single pane of glass view of everything that's going on in their site. So anything connected to the system will come up as a single view. So what they can see from that is a complete visual representation of everything that's going on. So anything that's actually in the system will come up. So they will see alarms, they will see problems with any sort of analytics, any PR information. They will also see feeds from the CCTV. But the important thing about it is if there's an event that comes in from one particular source, it can be correlated with other event sources. So for example, if someone's broken the glass on an alarm panel or somebody's opened a door, that can be correlated by a video event to see who's walked into the area or to see what else is going on. Clearly, we need to make sure that anything that happens on the system is logged for a number of reasons, obviously clearly for GDPR regulations these days, but also we need to make sure that any video feeds or any other alarm integration is available as evidence to courts. So we need to make sure that rules of evidence are followed, and we also know who's made any changes on the system. And the whole idea behind this is it gives your customer complete peace of mind. They know that everything's working because the system tells them if it isn't. And they also know that if they see a real alarm, it comes in and they can correlate it against other things. So they get a very, very fast understanding of where the problem has arisen from. Now, this is quite nice for your organization. So I know this is not a sales call at all. This is all about how we actually help in the field. But one of the things I've always found out is that if as an engineer you go onto site and you understand how the customer is working, how your organization works commercially, then you can actually increase the business level for your organization. So we thought it was worth going through this. So the way we operate is we try and do a recurring revenue model. Now there's a one-off activation fee when the box is first installed, and after that we go into an ongoing service charge. So year on year, the service charge comes in. Now this is really very good for reseller organizations because unless the customer cancels the recurring revenue, then you get automatic increase in revenue year on year. So you sell the box in year one, you're going to get the platform support charge in year one. In year two, regardless of whether you sell anything else to that customer, you're likely to get the renewal, the second year of the service charge on that one. And obviously, it also means you're staying in touch with your customers so you can then upsell and increase the amount of hardware there. Now, one of the things we do is provide different levels of packaging, as you all know. So the customer could go on to our system with a fairly basic package, but you can then add things as the contract progresses. So you could be working with a customer, seeing other facilities that they could benefit from, and then potentially upsell that, bringing more revenue into your company, increasing the retention level, and also keeping out the competition, which is always good. Okay, so the alarm receiving centres. I think I'll pass this one across to you because this is more in your speciality.
Yes, so one thing that we've added recently to the platform is we started seeing that the enterprises began using the Tether system for their internal control rooms. So if you have somebody like Next department stores, a lot of companies like Next and Next themselves have sorry, Next have their own internal security team, and that internal security team would manage the security of all the department stores. So before, they used to outsource all of this to an alarm receiving center, and those alarm receiving centers would have something like Sentinel or IMIX, whereas as of late, they're starting to switch to this in-house model where full-blown alarm receiving is overkill, but then managing incoming events and being able to dismiss them and review them later and share them is allows them to effectively run their companies. So this screenshot here shows incoming alarms. We call this a hybrid alarm view. So what happens is, if something is in progress, it will pop up into the screen and show you in real time what's happening. Whereas if it's already completed, then it will show you a thumbnail, a representative thumbnail of what triggered that event. So you can see here a car, or whatever the rules you have set. In this case, we're just using motion detection. But you could filter this down by alarm panel events or camera analytics events. And then as events come in real time, the tick box on the left allows you to dismiss those events, and they will disappear from this list without being deleted. So effectively, this is being used now to power video walls, where incoming events are coming in, they're being ticked off as they're coming in, and we also log who's ticked them off, how long it's taken them to respond, so that you can generate reports later on to see that you are meeting your SLAs, etc., or rather the customer security teams are meeting the SLAs. So that's quite an interesting bit of functionality. Likewise, if you are using an alarm receiving center, and typically Sentinel or IMIX, we can feed information to that without disrupting their processes. So this acts as more of an end user bit of functionality that can work together with alarm receiving centers without disrupting.
Okay, so we try to make this whole platform as flexible as we possibly can, because when you're on site talking to a customer, or when you're on the phone talking to a customer, they will obviously have specific requirements they want put on immediately. Now, one of the things we determined was we could use fixed packages which allow them to do certain things and then pay an upgrade to go to the next level. And that's certainly one way we're doing some pricing, but equally, we're also looking at how they can be as flexible as they possibly want. So everything is set up on the basis of a bunch of sliding scales. So some people will want very limited numbers of days recording. Other ones will want very, very considerable amounts of days storage. So it can work all the way from about 10 days up to 6 years of storage, depending exactly what the customer needs. Also, they can store at different levels. They may just want to store very basic time-lapse images right the way up to real-time video in 4K. And all of these things are flexible. They can all be configured within the system, but clearly as their requirements go up, the prices go up. So one of the things the system will do is calculate either the monthly or annual price based upon our current list price, and it will also tell you what types of data transfer is required and anything specific to the installation. One other thing that we can also offer for security reasons is storage in the UK, which is our default, storage in Europe, which is our default, somewhere in the EU, or specifically for a slight increase in price, we can store this just in the UK. So this may be very good for organisations with sensitive data requirements, for example, like the NHS. It allows you to do two things. Firstly, to reconfigure the network so the customer has exactly what they require, but it also allows you to conduct some what-if analysis. So you can say to the customer, okay, well, this is the price that you would have to pay if you increase the level of service you had with us. Okay. I think that was one for you.
So installation. We are presently working on a partner program to allow you to do things like register deals, so that we can support you on those, or rather project registration, so we can support you on those projects. Make sure that you are protected as the person that brought the project to us, so that if there's other bidders on the project, we're offering the price support to you. And this is something that is going to be announced as part of our partner program, where you'll also have a lot of internal documentation so that we can work together and help support you as an official Tether partner.
So just following on from that one, we're busily working at looking at all of our processes and procedures to make everything smoother and easier for you at the moment. And we are looking to try and get a partner meeting together sometime, hopefully in August, to talk about what we intend to be doing over the summer, and then following that up with another one in early autumn to just start to move things forward, so you know exactly where you stand with us and the best way of coming on board and joining us. Okay, so I spent my the early part of my career as a mainframe engineer, as some of you know. The most important thing that any organisation can know about their customer is what their customers are planning to do, what their existing problems are, and also the size of the organisation, some of their developments. And the best person normally to get that information with the customer is the engineer that's going on site. Inevitably, anyone that's on site with the customer, which is a reasonable customer anyway, will have a cup of coffee at some point, and that's often a good time to find out information. The engineers and installation people are normally the ones who are considered to be the least threatening to customers, so they'll have a good conversation. The salesperson turns up, then immediately they tend to be a little bit reserved, and because they're a bit concerned about the salespeople finding out too much. So it's very, very useful to be able to gather some of the sorts of information that we've got on this slide here, so you can pass that back to your own organisation or even onto us, so that we can follow this up and go back to the customer and maybe suggest an upgrade, suggest alternative things that they can be doing, and hopefully keeping those customers happy and content, but also to increase the revenue stream that we're getting from them.
Right, so a few other things that are quite important in you know, switching from the traditional way of doing things to moving to the cloud is that we have an API that allows others to feed information into the platform, and we can interoperate with pretty much any cloud platform out there. And we will be introducing new services in the coming months. So one of them is CONXTD. So if you are an existing CSL or WebWayOne or Emerson customer, then we can feed the alarm data information straight into Tether through the CONXTD platform. And vice versa, if you're already a CONXTD customer, you'll be able to get visual verification for all of your alarm data through Tether. So that all happens transparently. The way this is set up is you click on connect to Tether in the CONXTD platform, or vice versa, connect to CONXTD in our platform, and then you are just redirected to the other platform to log in, confirm who you are, and the integration is done. All of a sudden, all of that data can now be shared, and you get visual verification and alarm data shared between the platforms. So that's one example of an integration that is about to be announced. We will make our partner. So part of the partner program will be to give you a heads up of upcoming integrations, and you will also be able to vote on them or suggest things that you would like us to integrate with next. Another example is thermal. It's something we've added in the space of 2 weeks. We've had this for a while now, but that's an example of how quickly we can move on some of this stuff. So if you have a customer that has a specific requirement that we don't presently meet, it's still worth having a conversation with us, because it might either be something that is already nearly developed, or it could be something with a fairly quick turnaround that we can deliver. So for thermal, we can do things like notify if the temperatures are too high. That can feed into this alarm receiving interface that are demonstrated. It can be push notifications to people's phones. It can be email notifications. So it's quite flexible what you can do with this data. And we are presently pulling this data from Hikvision thermal cameras, and others are coming soon.
Well, that's pretty much the end of this presentation. As I mentioned already, we are going to be working all across the summer to try and improve the resources and facilities that you have to work with us. This will include a relaunch of the website. It will have more direct customer-facing information on it. It will also have a specific partner section through which you'll be able to gain full access to all of the information and resources that you need to help you with your customer base. We'll also be working on how we run our processes and smoothing these out, ensuring that everything works as quickly and smoothly as it possibly can for you. And we'll be announcing the start of this at the beginning of the summer, and then we will be having another partner meeting towards the end of the summer, beginning of the autumn, when we can exactly tell you how everything will work, how you sign up to different elements, and what's in it for you. And other than that, I think that's pretty much all we have to tell you, apart from answering any questions that may have come in. Do we have any outstanding questions?
So we've been answering questions as we went through. Does anybody else have any questions or anything they would like us to cover on this webinar? Okay, brilliant.
Sounds like there's dead silence in that case. We'll hand back to James, I suppose.
Yes. So just remember, if you do want us to cover anything as a one-on-one session, you can scan this QR code, and we'll make this presentation available as well, so that we can go through your specific requirements or challenges and address them.
Thank you very much for listening today.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for everybody for joining us for a few minutes today. Thank you for taking time out of your diaries. Really good session, guys. Really enjoyed that. Lots of useful information, I think, for everybody that's on the call today. It's nice to see so many people coming back and joining us from other sessions of the week. Yes, so it's really good. So we're here to help as well. So if you want support, salespeople support, we're here as well, Mayflex that is. So reach out to your salesperson or your contact within us, as well as speak to the guys at Tether. So we're going to be around for about another 5 minutes if you think of a question. So we're going to stick it back on mute and stop the recording. But if you've got another question, pop it in the Q&A box, and we'll answer those within the next 5 or so minutes or so. But thank you very much for joining us.